Hello, I hope you guys are doing well. I had a number of issues with my computer stuff last week, and I'm really sorry. It was something that I just could not avoid, couldn't get out of it. Trying to get them fixed as quickly as possible. What it came down to is I could not fix the sound on that video. And I know several people have said we're desperately eager to turn our stuff in. We don't want late points or taken off or anything like that. And what I'm going to do is this week, tonight, I'm just going to be recording the same kind of thing that I did last week. And what we're going to be doing is I'm also going to be recording an additional lesson for this week. And if you're able to do the reflection for both of them, that's great. You'll get credit for both of them. If one of them you can't do the reflection for, you won't lose points. So basically it'll be, if you're able to do both reflections, you get points for both of them. If you're only able to do one of the two, then you'll get points for one of the two, but you're not going to get a 0 if you don't turn one of them in. And I'll write an email and explain that when I send out the second video, but I'm going to try to get that to you tomorrow. So I'm just going to go over the same kind of stuff that I did previously, and I hope that it makes sense to everybody. I mentioned before, one of my ongoing issues with gender in the arts is that it almost always quickly turns into a conversation about women representation in the arts. And I think that's appropriate too, but I'd like to expand this a bit so we can look at how genders are expressed within a culture, perhaps. And then I think that helps to inform a bit about how art is expressed in the culture as well. And last time we talked about gender and arts in the continent of Africa. And this time we're talking about gender and arts in indigenous people. We're going to touch a little bit on Australia, not very much. Mostly though, we're going to be talking about indigenous arts of the Americas. And there's some really interesting stuff that I think you'll find fascinating. So I'm going to give a little bit of a gender background, talk about how genders are represented and how they represent themselves just a little bit. I have some really interesting videos. I don't know how many I'll be able to share with you tonight. So I'm getting my computer fixed tomorrow, and so I should be able to get all that stuff up on the on our module boards either probably tomorrow or tomorrow evening, one of the two. And then I also wanted to talk about at least I have 5 or 6 indigenous women artists from Mesoamerica, South America, and the United States and Canada. You know, just talk about several of them. So we're going to be hopping around a little bit, but before we start, one of the things that I think is really fascinating is our perspective as Americans. Most of us are descended from colonists or inhabitants. Many of us are from families that came over here willingly. A lot of us are from families that were forced over here and broken up as families, had their identities completely stripped from them. Many of the people that lived here, their identities had been, forcibly stripped from them as well. This last week, I had to drive to Monticello to assess some temple windows there. And on that drive, you go through a significant highway. I think it's I-70. But there's a lot of incredibly cool stuff to see, with a lot of pullouts that you can, their vantage points with just absolutely horrific bathrooms. Holy cow. If you guys are going to drive to Monticello, I recommend taking with you whatever you need to sterilize your hands, anything else you have with you. I took disposable wipes that I had, and oh man, that was nasty. But at the lookouts, they have a lot of uh, metal plaques that tell you just a little bit, maybe 120 words each, about what these different sites represent. One of them, they were talking about how before Utah became a state, significantly before, the particular canyon path was used by Spanish slave runners who would kidnap Native Americans, a lot of Paiute and Ute, and take them through these canyons down south to Mexico City and sell them, 200 years ago for $200 a person. And one of the comments, well, and I don't know how it was intended, but one of the comments was just asked you to reflect on how would you feel if you woke up one morning and realized that you had to walk all that way, there's no way to get out of it, and you were a slave all of a sudden. And it was just asking people to reflect on that. But it's interesting to me, all this is heartbreaking. It's also very interesting to me to consider how our ancestors dealt with a lot of these kinds of situations that they were thrust into. And with America, when we talk about human rights, a lot of what we go to is, and rightly so, the forced African immigration. Of millions of people ripped from their homes and brought here, families broken up and lives destroyed. What a lot of the times we don't think about is the slave trade of indigenous people here to the Americas as well, which there was a lot of. And what is ongoingly sad, and ultimately I think will be something that we can look back at and be happy as a human race that we supported the people that reclaimed their identity, is there is a worldwide reclamation of humanity and healing for the people that have been generational victims of colonization. And this is something that is very difficult to address with people like my sister and my three brothers, who are all indigenous people, because they're still living through the process of colonization / post-colonization, because legally they're not colonized anymore, but there's still this strong feeling that they have to gain permission somehow to reclaim their identity as a culture and a people. I think lately the issues regarding the unnamed children that were buried at Indian boarding schools, the processes of returning honor and dignity to those young lives, I think that's a really strong and powerful step that can help lead towards healing. But what we're going to be talking about today is a little bit of Indigenous American views on gender. Now, one thing that's very important to understand is when I talk about this, I am usually just hallmarking a couple different points of view. There were thousands of nations throughout North, Meso, and South America that were usually lumped together under new names given to them by people who didn't even try to pronounce what their true names were. And a lot of that identity has been stripped away and blended together. So we have like Plains Indians, Northwest Coast Indians. We don't talk about Yakima, Nez Perce, Blackfoot, Paiute, Ute, Southern Shoshone or Northern Shoshone. We just lump them all together. And I say we, the predominant American culture. It takes an individual who wants to help reclaim humanity to really dive into this. But this page from the Smithsonian, I really like this because it is Land Digital put together an interactive map. It is a little bit difficult to manipulate unless you have one of those finger-sensitive pinch screens. And what is incredibly cool about it is that the people who put it together showed where the different pre-colonizing cultures were. And we can see on this map, let's see, Utah is right around here. So we have the Shoshone in Nevada. And then I get a little bit closer. We have Ute right there in Southern Paiute. Apache were over here, but in the area that we are living in right now, there was a lot of, you're seeing the top of my head because I'm trying to look close at the screen. The words are really tiny. We have a lot of that, and you can go in and see where the ancestral land areas were for Goshute and Dene were, and you see a lot of that, how all this overlaps. And while I am not personally responsible for stealing land from anybody, I am a person who was born and live on lands that have been lived on by many people for thousands of years before I ever got here. And I think that rather than any sort of negative reaction, I think that should be something that impels us to consider that all land is sacred to somebody. And one of my friends is a guy named Lacey Peterson. He died a couple years ago from complications due to COVID. He was an elder of the Native American Church, particularly Ute Nation. And he and I became friends because he thought I was an interesting white boy, is what he called me. And one of the many conversations I've had with him was, how do I deal with these feelings that I have? And he said, you are not personally guilty for what ancestors have done, but you are responsible for helping to repair. Whatever that means, whatever you're led to do to help that repair. And I think a huge part of that is acknowledging our ancestors and our relatives, our siblings who are Native, Indigenous, and wherever they are in the world, acknowledging that we're all part of the same large human group and human family, and to honor and respect the contributions made to bettering humanity from every angle. And so when I get an opportunity to present some of the remarkable artists and work that's done from a position of strong humanity, healing, and pride, it's a little bit exciting for me. And so we're going to talk about just a couple artists. One of the, I'm going to take the sharing off for just a second. One of the issues ongoing is art being done. And another issue that's something that we really need to talk about is awareness of indigenous views on gender and gender expression. That is important for several reasons, but one of the reasons is that it helps us to appreciate and understand how different groups saw themselves as human beings. And I'm going to...
Major funding for Ingenuity was provided...
Sorry, I want to share with you a couple videos and a couple articles. And what is going to be, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you a couple videos, and then I will also talk about them, but I will put them into the module, so you'll get access to the full video later. And now I am just trying to return. So I want to show a couple videos really quick. I don't know if I'll be able to get to share.
Hey, it's Marie. Just wanted to
I hope that
remind you to sign up for my free writing class. We're going to cover.
I hope that you don't hear all the videos that are going crazy in the background right now. I'm trying to I'm trying to sort things out. Let's see. Okay. I'm having a little bit of a problem because I can't find where to share the screen with you. I am pretty sure I didn't. Oh, here we go. Okay, I'm sorry about that. Sigh. Yeah, all this newfangled electronical stuff is so exciting to get to learn how to use. But we're going to talk a little bit about indigenous views, particularly American indigenous views on gender fluidity, gender perspective. And we're going to touch briefly on how gender expression is shifting. Oh, no, I can't. Okay, we're not going to be able to do that a little bit. I will introduce you briefly to some significant artists in the Aboriginal space, what's going on there. But most of what we're going to be talking about is gender expression and women artists who are Indigenous Americans. Okay. All right, so here we are. There's going to be just a couple of videos, and I'm hoping you guys can hear this just fine. We'll watch this. These videos have been put together by Indigenous Americans. One of the processes of colonization, and this is really apparent in relations to Indigenous Australians, Africans, and Americans, is that the colonizers will strip from people their self-identifiers that lay claim to nationhood and rulership that should have been on par with the leadership of the colonizers. And that is a standard thing where you belittle or derogatorize the colonized people. So instead of being known as kings, emperors, and presidents, which Native Americans were, they were relegated to chiefs and wise men or wise women instead of nations. That word was changed to tribes. So you get executive leaders that are elected into power in the Cherokee Nations, and the League of Nations that was prevalent in the government of Indigenous peoples in Central and Southeast United States, and they became tribes and chiefs. And it is interesting to me that the federal government has been backtracking for the last 20, 30 years to deliver the proper honorifics to people. which is nice. But what we're going to be doing is watching a little bit of a video, a couple different videos. One talks about genders, and then a couple talk about from the perspective of specific individuals. So let's hope you can see this. I'm pretty sure you can. I hope you can hear it too.
By the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Okay, I'm going to leave it muted right now, and I'm just going to skip ahead. But what this video talks about is there's animated interviews with several indigenous Americans. The two-spirit term is a term that is used by several different indigenous nations in the United States and Canada, particularly, and it has come to be adopted by many indigenous nations or throughout both countries. Two-spirit references the idea that an individual, they may be born with a specific sex, but their gender expression is more of a mix of traditional role expectations. And what I liked about this video is that it talks about individuals who are indigenous Americans who have gender expressions that are different than traditional norms, and how they address that within the cultural understanding of their societies. What is fascinating to me, one of the things that's fascinating to me from an outsider's perspective, is that these views do not sit comfortably with a homogeneous view taken from interpretations of Christian scriptures. And what is interesting to me is that, you know, there's no guarantee against mistreatment and misunderstanding, of course, but there are many indigenous nations who have social mechanics in place already that have worked for many generations that help people to find their relationship with their gender identity and help them to express themselves in healthy ways and be viewed as contributing members of the nation. This video, I hope, what does two-spirit mean? I really appreciated this because this individual is a dancer, a traditional dancer, and when they started becoming aware of their own flexing gender identity, their grandma gave them a steel hoop and a bamboo hoop or a reed hoop and told them to learn to dance with both. And they took it as a metaphor to find the path that worked with them best to accept their own gender identity and accept how they would fit into their culture. One of the things, and there's several videos that I found that were always really good. But here we talk, you can see there's also a video on Mexico's third gender, which is similar to the third gender we talked about from Japan. And in this one, it talks about 5 genders from an indigenous Indonesian perspective. But there's also a video that I found where an individual talks about the 5 genders in their own Dene culture. And in both the indigenous Indonesian and indigenous American cultures, the 5 genders were predominantly a masculine person who was born male sex, who gendered as a male, an individual who was born with male sex, who gendered as a female, individual who was born as a female sex, who gendered as a female, individual born with a female gendered sex, who gendered herself or gendered themselves as a male. So male, 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 female, 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 and female, male. And then the 5th gender is somebody who identifies equally as both genders at the same time, or androgynous. And what is really interesting about the Dene individual is that they will identify as this individual here. They will identify, they were born male sex, but they are able to identify as either male or a female when it feels most appropriate. I mean, they're able to navigate that line healthily for themselves and their family. And they said it's been really difficult, but they found a way to do that. And what's fascinating to me as a member of the Dene culture, this is something that people respect. I mean, they respect that personal navigation of gender. And what is really fascinating about this in Indonesia is that the shaman has to identify as that 5th gender that is both male and female equally. And the reason they explain they have to do that, and unfortunately we don't have enough pronouns in English to fully accommodate all this, but they said that the reason why they need to do that is because they have to straddle the line between spirit realms and gender roles in order to be the conduit for the spirit, the balance that affects everything. And so that they have to be fully androgynous in order to be the full, to function as a full shaman for the community. And which I thought was absolutely fascinating. And then a little bit of a shift in topic. You're very familiar, hopefully, with indigenous art from Australia. It's one of the art forms that is absolutely fascinating to examine, because this, where things like Russian futurism and Cubism addressed different facets and views of an object or idea moving through time and space, and it did it all at the same time. Aboriginal work seeks to do something very similar, but instead of moving the object through time and space alone, they examine also the interior and exterior of an object, as well as both its physical and spiritual presences. So, it's multi-dimensional art where they're trying to show everything from the electromagnetic aura around an object to the bones within an object, and also the life cycle of the object all at the same time. And it's absolutely fascinating work. But for generations, it has been predominantly the field for men. And with cultural shifts, as more and more indigenous Australians claim their role straddling both modern Australia and ancient tradition, they're finding that more and more the most marginalized group in Australia has been, for the last 150 years, Aboriginal women. And that group has been finding a voice by becoming the visual art pioneers for sacred Aboriginal artworks. And so, this group of people, Aboriginal women, who are the most marginalized group, have become the most powerful with visual arts and traditional Aboriginal art, which I think is absolutely fascinating. So I'll share that article with you, and I think it's really incredible. And they're working with Aboriginal designs that are not just painted with traditional materials on traditional surfaces, but they are also working with things like digital printing, silkscreen, contemporary collage, lots and lots of different types of artwork. And so I think it's absolutely amazing. And include a list of the women that are involved as well. So from all that, I wanted to talk a little bit about, I wanted you to reflect a bit on the struggles that people may have. This kind of intersection, I'm leaning back in my chair, and so I moved far away from the camera. But there is this ongoing multi-dimensional intersection that I think everybody has a rough time living. That's part of the process of being human. One of the things that identify us as human is being able to support each other's rough time, and encourage each other. But I think there's a particular struggle when someone is trying to work through reclaiming their human identity, as well as trying to find where they fit into the constructed universe as an individual, typically a gendered individual. And it is fascinating to me how, this awareness that so many of our cultural predecessors acknowledged between 3 and 5 genders, where they were very aware that, people were sexed at birth as masculine or male and female, but the masculine and feminine roles of gender were something that were discovered and worked through by the individuals within the framework of the culture that they lived in. And we see in Japan and contemporary Mexico, there are 3 genders that are recognized. And then and the Mexico one, even though it's a resurgence of an indigenous awareness, it is becoming more apparent today. People are rediscovering that awareness today. And then you also get other cultures like indigenous Indonesia, as well as indigenous Americans who were aware of, who identified as up to 5 different genders. And I think, and this is completely editorial. It's not going to be on any test ever, I hope. Certainly not a test from me. But my thoughts are that as individuals go through the struggle of being human and try to claim or reclaim their humanity within a framework of expression consistent with them and their well-being, then as bystanders and fellow humans, I think it's completely appropriate to do what we can to feel as comfortable as possible supporting people's human right to live happily and be honest with themselves. And there's a lot that there's a lot there to unpack, and there's a lot to reflect on and a lot to think about. And I think it comes down to what are we comfortable with individually. I think that for some of us, it may be dedicating ourselves to just remaining polite to everybody. To others, it may be that we will do what we can to support somebody's choice in how they want to present themselves and how they would like us to interact with them. And I think that's appropriate too. When you go into somebody else's home, you're expected to follow the rules of the home. But and what is very interesting to me is that the very great majority of individuals with whom I've interacted who live within this realm of multitudinous gender expression that do not fit comfortably into a binary. The great majority of these individuals have been incredibly generous and patient with me as I work through my own packaging, my own baggage, to find healthy places from which to interact. Personally healthy places within which to interact. And I really appreciate that patience. And I am very grateful for the individuals that are willing to film themselves talking about these kinds of struggles. The one individual who's Navajo, who is a gender fluid individual, they have a YouTube channel and different social media accounts where they just share traditional Navajo teachings or traditional Dine teachings about the world in general, as well as sharing elements from their own life, to show how individuals can live happily. But I wanted to go on and talk about some of the real pioneers that are specifically women artists that work within the American indigenous art space. And they work from many different places. And you're probably very familiar with a number of them. This individual is Frida Kahlo. One of the most amazing things to me about Frida Kahlo is, like Van Gogh, she was able to show or demonstrate beauty dealing within the realm of her own personal pain. She had a lot of crap thrown at her. She almost died in an accident, and for the rest of her life after the accident, she was in constant pain. She had a lot of struggles with ideas of self-identity, gender identity, identity as a colonized person, and identity as an indigenous person, identity as a woman. She dealt with all these things by, instead of railing at the world and getting angry at absolutely everything, she decided that she was going to be constructive and create beauty, just like Van Gogh did, that would show people how she viewed the world through her pain, but not forcing people to endure her pain with her. And I think that is amazing. She did an awful lot of self-reflective portraits. She did performance pieces. She did video work. And this is all well before that kind of thing was, widely recognized by art endowments. She was doing performance art and art film well before that was an acceptable media. Those were acceptable media for people to pursue. And most of her work is self-referential self-portraits, but they are absolutely fascinating. And this is just some of the work of hers. And then I have found several videos. There's actually, I'm only going to show the 4-minute one with you, and we can look at one of her famous ones, the two Fridas. That really expresses an awful lot of what's going on. She was a woman who was unashamed of being a human being. She did not like feeling restricted into what society expected, a woman to look like. I'm talking about cosmetics. I'm talking about hair grooming, things like that. So she allowed her unibrow to flourish, but she also allowed herself to grow hair. I mean, she was a woman, she had hair, that was it. And she and her husband, they were both very passionate people. They divorced for a while and got remarried. They had a tumultuous relationship that had an awful lot of energy. And she developed, as an artist, an intricate web of surrealist image, an intricate web of surrealist visual imagery that she developed into her personal visual language. And her stuff is just amazing. Like the two Fridas, you see on the left, you have um, a woman who is dressed in a respectable upper class dress. On the right, you have the same woman who's dressed in a respectable middle income dress, showing two very different aspects of the culture within which she lived. And in both aspects, you see on the left, there's this rather um, bloody portrayal of a heart. I say that because she has a pair of they're surgical clamps on the end of one of the veins leading from her heart, and it's spilled onto her white dress. And the right hand side, you see, this is her heart as well, and we see the veins connecting them. The one on the right isn't as bloody. What's interesting to me is that they're holding hands. They are they're both self-portraits, and they're self-portraits of her identity from two different spectra within the culture that she lived. But what we would expect to be at odds with each other seem to be supporting each other. And this is one of her portraits where she's talking about healing. And many of her portraits, even though they deal with really harsh and painful imagery, they are indicative of this ongoing work of hers that represented self-healing. And I wanted to share this as well, which I thought was just a really cool. This is from one of the first displays of this painting in 1939. And I like it because it shows her in front of this large painting. This is the actual real life Frida Kahlo. So, very realistic self-portrayal. And it was I don't know, I really appreciate and honor and enjoy just the aplomb that she demonstrates, the very calm. She's very assured of herself. She's very confident. And I think that is absolutely wonderful to see in any artist, but I think it's especially amazing to see within an artist that deals so much within the realm of personal pain. That is not a fun field to navigate for anybody. Now, another individual we're going to look at is somebody else who she's Anishinaabe from Canada. Anishinaabe is her nation. Her name is Rebecca Belmore, and she is still active. She is a performance artist. She's an installation artist, and she does a lot of really fascinating work. It says that through her sculptures, videos, performances, and photographs, she ceaselessly fights against historical amnesia and focuses on the effects of colonialism on indigenous populations, more particularly on the women within those populations. And her work, I think, is pretty astounding. Let me share just an image of her. And she looks like everybody's favorite grandma. I mean, if you got an opportunity to go on a road trip with her, I would take it. Definitely. But what I love about her is that she is completely unassuming, but her work is profoundly thoughtful. And I'm including a link to her artwork, her website, where she shows many of her own personal pieces, as well as video of her performances. And knowing what her background is, I think her work is really astounding. It's something that good performance and installation work is very difficult to pull off and have feel credible. And she is completely comfortable with doing that. But more than that, more than being merely a professional artist and a professional, she is a perfectionist, and she does stuff with layered meaning that is incredibly engaging. Yeah, of course, you can dismiss it without much thought if you want to. You can walk by and say, "Oh yeah, that's nice. What a pretty rose dress." But then, when you read what she has to say about her own work, and you read about what is truly important to her in her work, and then you start considering the history of the issues that she is addressing, um, the multiple layers are just amazing. And I'll invite you to explore this website and see the different stuff that she's done. And looking at her work, there are things that she's sharing in common with Yves Saint Laurent, or Yves Klein, as well as Kiki Smith, and even some of the graphic imagery. And I'm not talking about graphic like nasty or gross, but just beautifully choreographed imagery. Reminds me a little bit of Barbara Kruger as well, where she's dealing with very powerful, very emotional topics, doing it in a way that is reverent, and because of her reverence, because of her calm, because of her dignity, it just becomes incredibly powerful. I do have a short film that I'm hoping will be, I'm going to see if I can share it. I'm hoping it'll be all right to share. I mentioned before that sometimes YouTube will want to edit things out. So this is just an example of Rebecca Belmore's work, and this is fairly recent. So Frida Kahlo was 100 years ago, 80 years ago. Rebecca Belmore is still alive and still a practicing artist.
My own community.
Oh, sorry. Let's see, do this here. Okay. And we're only going to watch about the first minute or so of this.
At this time in my career as an artist and my practice as an artist, I've come to an understanding of myself as a worker. It's how I contribute to our society. And in particular, I guess, as Anishinaabe woman, I'm interested in addressing issues that pertain to my own history and my own community.
So I invite you to watch the rest of that as you see it in the module. Like I said, my computer problem should be fixed by tomorrow, I'm hoping. Now, these are two people that represent very different ends of a visual art spectrum. Frida Kahlo was trained as a traditional painter, primarily Fauvist style, and she did work that transcended expectations of the movement that she was part of, the stylistic movement. And she dealt with incredibly powerful issues through her own relationship with her cultural expectations, and her own navigation of those expectations laid upon her. And then we get Rebecca Belmore, who does stuff. She is also a traditionally trained artist, but she does performance work and installation work involving live models, involving live people, sometimes herself. So she did writing on the floor with clay. That was entirely by herself. She does these things to engage viewers and viewers and watchers of her work, to engage them in intellectual meditations, essentially, on what it means to be an indigenous woman, but also what it means to be colonized, what it means to be emerging from colonialization, what it means to be a human being. One of the things that I think is difficult for many of us to appreciate is that every single treaty the federal government has ever made with any indigenous population has been broken, and many have been broken multiple times. And it is an ongoing source of moral concern, essentially. And to be able to navigate these pain points through productive and constructive and creative means to communicate, rather than to berate or guilt or shame, I think is pretty amazing. Now, this next artist is a little bit different than the two that we've already looked at. This woman came a little bit after Frida Kahlo, and it was somebody that actually John F. Kennedy knew who she was. And this woman is absolutely astounding. My grandma was a professional ballet dancer with the Seattle Ballet, with the Pacific Northwest Ballet. And this woman, her name is Maria Tallchief. And I don't know if you know who she is or anything, but she was the first American who was accepted to perform with the Bolshoi Ballet. And she was Native American. You know, that which I think is astounding. It's one of those things where represents a minority in the United States, and she was the most successful professional ballerina in the Americas. Essentially, she was absolutely astounding. Her name is Maria Tallchief, and this is an individual who she just recently passed away, but she was from Oklahoma, Saugeen Nation, and she moved to New York as a teenager and began training professionally as a ballet dancer. And by World War II, well, that's when she moved there. But within 20 years, she was nationally ranked, internationally ranked as a professional ballet dancer. She, in 1960, Tallchief performed at the Bolshoi Theater in Moscow, making her the first American to do so. So the first of any American, and she was a Native American and indigenous American. I think that's pretty astounding and remarkable. And there's several other artists I want to share with you. I'm just going to do a little bit more. So I'm going to include a little bit more biographical information regarding Maria Tallchief. I think she's absolutely amazing. Now, so we have a dancer, we have a performance artist, we have a flautist, and this woman is Salish, and she is she's a surrealist, and I look at her work and I'm thinking of Paul Klee, and I'm going to just show you her art from her website, but I think she's absolutely astounding. I love the work she does. But her name is Wana Quick to See Smith is her name, and let me show you some of her work, and I think you'll agree it is absolutely astounding. As are all these artists that I found, it wasn't entirely my fault that I found them, but her work is really powerful, and it fits. It's not just. I think one of the problems when you're dealing with art history and you're dealing with individuals who represent groups of people that have been historically underrepresented. One of the problems I have is that it is easy just to pick the first one you find and say, look, this person did it too. But what I am finding are these profoundly professional artists that know their craft, they're masters of their craft, like Maria Tallchief, and they aren't just professional artists, but they are incredibly good at what they do, and that's something that I think is just astounding. So you look at Wana Quick to See Smith, and her works are very much in the vein of Paul Klee and other surrealists of her time period. Actually, no, this not of her time period. She is a lot more contemporary, but the stuff that she does is absolutely gorgeous within this vein. And I love the fact that she is incorporating things like petroglyph art, as well as more contemporary imagery drawn from characterizations of different groups of people, as well as historical imagery. She also reminds me a little bit of Basquiat. I think that, which is really interesting. He was kind of a prophet for the urban surrealism, and she feels like there's a lot of that same kind of energy in her work, and I think that it is very beautifully done. So looking at just a little bit of her work, I think this is incredibly cool piece. It also reminds me of Rauschenberg as well. So I love the fact that we're finding artists who are not just artists of underrepresented groups, but they are also artists that are truly decent with what they do. Here's another image of one of her works. So she was born in 1940, and I don't know, her work combines a lot of elements that necessarily should have been combined a while ago, I think. But I love how she turns these pieces into both social commentary as well as personal expression. And even if you had no context for what was going on, they still are visually engaging and become aesthetically powerful, which is really remarkable. When you can generate interest and engage people without having to always give them context and permission to enjoy your work, I think that really says an awful lot about the artist. So, and I do have a short video about her work. And I'm sorry, I'm just waiting for the YouTube the YouTube advertisement to disappear. Okay, this we're gonna watch just a couple. No, I don't. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and we'll see if we can watch a little bit of this, and then see if YouTube edits it out. All right.
She's a Native American artist and activist, finally getting some long overdue recognition. Serena Altschul introduces us to Jean Quick-to-See Smith, her art now on display at New York's Whitney Museum.
Oh, that's great. Artist Jean Quick-to-See Smith certainly has her own way of seeing and painting America.
How would you describe your work to someone who hasn't seen it before?
I think that every single piece of work tells a story about Native American history or about my tribe. I really concentrate on the images, the large icons, like a map. Everybody can relate to that. And there are words there. It will give them some clues. Say, land of the giants.
Right.
Like, that's what we are.
Right.
America is all powerful.
Those clues are now on display at the Whitney Museum of American Art in New York, home to a retrospective of Smith's works.
In here are hypodermic needles, plastic water bottles.
The show will eventually travel to Fort Worth and Seattle.
Every single one of these things have a connection together.
It's a milestone moment for the 83-year-old artist, but also for the Whitney. This is its first retrospective for a Native American artist.
Why now?
I think what's happened is George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, and Standing Rock brought issues to the fore about the lack of representation in our institutions in this country. Every part of our society needs representation by all its citizens.
Born on the Flathead Reservation in Montana, a citizen of the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes, Jean Quick to See Smith received the name Quick to See as a child.
People think that, oh, that's a great name for an artist.
Right.
But any of us that carry these names, often they're old family names, it is really about insight into things.
Her affinity for art would come later.
When I met paint, it was like an epiphany. I didn't know the word artist or what it meant, but I went to a community college and I did take art. And at the end of the year, the teacher called me in and he said, you know, you can draw better than the men, but you can't be an artist. You're a woman and you need to know your place in life.
But Smith knew her place was in the art world. In the last 5 decades, she's had nearly 100 shows and high-profile acquisitions of her work by institutions like the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. In 2020, hers was the first painting by a Native American to join the gallery's collection.
I'm not thinking about it just as that they collected my piece and that's a grand moment. The grand moment would come when they create a collection of contemporary Native art, not just antiquities.
You know what's remarkable about you, Jean? You never say I. You always say we and us.
I sometimes say, if you just let me crack the door and come through the door, I'll bring my community with me. And that's been my premise all the way along and in the work that I'm doing right now.
You can see that commitment to raising Indigenous voices throughout her art.
My intention with making the map was one to talk about the stolen land, all the United States, and then I used clippings to show that Indian people do live there. We're still here, right? We are here.
As for Smith, she calls New Mexico home, living just outside Albuquerque.
I want to see it go all the way down.
There, she and her team, which includes her son, artist Neil Ambrose Smith, keep up with the growing demand for her work.
I have to stain the horns.
But when it comes to Jean Quick to See Smith, it seems the work is never done.
This is really nice. I can dream bigger and think bigger with some of the doors opening, but it's a new kind of freedom, I could say. Yeah.
I can see your excitement.
Yes.
So.
So I think that's a pretty good introduction to her. I think she's amazing. She has a lot of that Rauschenberg kind of feel, like some of the other painters that you see in contemporary life. But she also some of her work also reminds me of Jasper Johns as well. And so, you know, again, this is an example of where we look at art and say, oh yeah, here's a woman who's an older woman who is doing specific things. Let's just look at her art, but then you realize that her stuff is actually really, really worthwhile. And I wanted to share just a couple Indigenous works as well. One of the perspectives that a lot of particularly Native women artists deal with is there's this idea of resisting annihilation, you know, and that's one of the reasons why work is created, work is made, because there is a vitality, a vital importance to the reclamation of identity. And I think what's one of the things that's really awful is that there is a need felt for anybody to have to justify their existence. I think that we should all be free to define our existence rather than having to defend it. And that becomes a really difficult, powerful, and pervading challenge for a lot of folks who are members of indigenous colonized populations. Because not only are they trying to express themselves, which is something that every artist does, but they're also trying to validate in the eyes of other people their right to exist as human beings, and they're trying to reclaim their human identity. And oh, that was interesting. I wanted to share something with you. And I wonder why this stuff is being weird. But there's a couple articles that I wanted to share with you as well that I'll just flash really quickly on the screen so you can be aware of them. One is indigenous artists, many of whom are women, who this was done about 6 years ago. And these artists are specifically engaging ideas of post-colonial reclamation of identity. And they are not all painters or anything like this. Like Tanya Tagak is an Inuit, but she is a professional throat singer as well. And she has developed a kind of a unique genre. I don't know if you know much about the Mongolian punk heavy metal that's going on right now, where Mongolian artists are combining throat singing with hardcore punk and thrash metal, which it sounds like a horrible combination, but it's actually incredibly powerful. And Tanya Tagak is someone who does this with specific design to address ideas of creating identity, rediscovering identity in as a subject of colonialism. And we have on this list a poet as well, Heid Erdrich from Minneapolis. And she does videos of her poetry as well, which is really interesting. Wendy Red Star, who is a Portland-based artist. Buffy Sainte-Marie. She's another musician. So we have several musicians, we have poets. And then Tommy Pico and Tall Paul. Tommy Pico is a poet and Tall Paul is a rapper. So we have several different artists. Those last two are both men, and so I kind of glossed over them. Please read about them in the article. And then I found a really cool article that's 5 artworks in the Denver Art Museum. And this was a show that was done like 2 years ago, I believe. And the individuals represented in this represent several different nations. And Andrea Carlson, her work is very powerfully graphic. Again, graphic with imagery, not graphic with violence. And I really enjoy Sonia Kelleher-Combs' work. Her stuff is absolutely beautiful. It has this kind of surreal, gentle quality that reminds me of anthotypes and just gorgeous collages. And she puts this together so that her single display looks like an entire salon encounter. We go into it like a Parisian salon in the 1800s. And her work is gentle and meditative, and again, incredibly beautiful. And these people are dealing with radically painful issues. I think Wendy Red Star reminds me an awful lot of the Dada era collage artist. And her stuff, I think, is really fascinating because it's relatively simple imagery. And then once you realize what's going on, you think, holy cow, because there's an awful lot to unpack. And I really like Marie Watt. My sister was a traditional Shoshone beading artist. She did glass bead on leather and with traditional designs. And Marie Watt is able to, she's Seneca, and she is able to combine traditional pattern forms with contemporary materials and contemporary textures to create works that I have a very strong contemporary and postmodern feel. And again, address issues that, although the work itself is nice to look at and nice to encounter, they deal with issues that are really, really painful. And Diana Whitehawk does work that feels almost minimalist, where she is working with just powerful, repetitious, and simple textures that create designs that are heavily informed by traditional patterning, as well as a traditional visual narrative from her own personal family background. So, this kind of stuff gets exciting for me just as an artist to see what new stuff people are coming up with. But it's also incredibly exciting to me that people with a background of pain can work through and address the pain by building stuff that the rest of us that is beautiful. So it is astounding. I think out of these artists, Sonia Kelleher Combs is one of my favorites, and my other favorite is Diane Whitehawk. This feels to me very Lakota because the powerful graphic design imagery is very Lakota, but it's also incredibly contemporary. And so I just think stuff like this is absolutely astounding to me. How people are able. Oh, you guys didn't see any of that, did you? Okay, let me show you what I was looking at, and you guys can appreciate it too. Okay, I'm sorry about that. I'm trying really hard to work with all this newfangled technology. This is Andrew Carlson, very contemporary, using a lot of imagery that feels like contemporary graphic illustration. And she does beautiful work that really makes you think about things. Then Sonia Kelleher Combs, her work is, see if I, there we go. Her work is astounding. I think that's absolutely gorgeous. Just the gentle, let's see if I can blow it up at all. I love that. The paintings feel organic and meditative. And then having them together makes for an environment building that is quite powerful as well. So let's Wendy Red Star. This was another of the women I was talking about. Her work makes me feel, or reminds me of the Dadaist collage artists, but her work is quite a bit more than that. And when you realize what the elements are that she chose, it becomes powerful. And then Marie Watt works with, she's Seneca, and she works with traditional Seneca pattern elements that she decontextualizes and then combines with very contemporary textures and creates works that are incredibly contemporary, very, very modern, postmodern stuff. But it fits together and works and it balances. And then Deani Whitehawk, who's Lakota, I was mentioning that this feels very Lakota. It is a powerful piece that deals strongly with Lakota patterning, traditional patterning. But what she does with it is amazing to me because it's very, very contemporary. It's using contemporary materials. It's a contemporary display of the work. And again, incredibly beautiful. Now, I'm going to turn that off and stop sharing. I'm sorry, every time I stand up, I keep accidentally leaning back in my chair so that I look shorter and shorter. Because last week my computer died and I was not able to film or get anything online, I'm getting my computer repaired tomorrow. What I want to do is we're going to have a reflection on this stuff. As soon as I put everything online, we're going to have a reflection on this stuff. And then I'm also going to do another video for this present video is for last week that didn't work, that the sound didn't come through. I'm going to do another video for this week. And what I'm going to do is make it so that you can pick one or the other to do your reflection on. And if you choose to do your reflection on both, then you'll get credit for both. But if you don't do your reflection on one, you're not going to get points removed. All right. So, and I think that'll solve the issue for that. So if you have time to just watch the video for one of them instead of doing the reflection and studying the art as well, then that's fine. You won't lose points because it wasn't your fault that my computer wasn't working. So this kind of stuff is exciting to me because it is really rare for people in pain to do anything other than just want to show their pain. And the reason why I use that phrase is because these artists that we've been looking at in their own words, talking about their own work, demonstrate a very powerful awareness of their own personal struggles, their own personal pain. But I think the mark of the profound altruist, I think Heidegger called him the Übermensch, the individual who's able to rise above their pain and create something worthwhile. I think that these women we've looked at really demonstrate that. They're dealing with issues of cultural identity and humanity, as well as their own roles as gendered individuals in the societies they belong to. And they produce work that we can engage with visually or auditorily, in case of the musicians. But it's amazing to see that they create things that are profoundly beautiful as well. So anyway, I will share that with you and put that online. I'm going to share this recording. I'm going to log off now and put this recording up for you, so you should be able to see it tonight and watch the whole thing all the way through. And I would like you to let me know what you think about that, where you watch this video and the next one, and then you just decide which of those you write your reflection on. Well, I hope that that's appropriate. So I would appreciate your feedback on that. But in the meantime, between now and next time I talk to you, I hope you have an absolutely wonderful time. And I look forward to seeing your responses about the stuff that we've covered. Thank you.